Hello dearies, it's Candlelight Tale time, and this time I'm going to tell you a story from a graveyard. There was this wonderful woman named Glenda, and she had married a wonderful man. She just adored him, and he passed away, so she had him buried at Arlington Cemetery since he was a veteran. And she was left with his father-in-law, who was very ailing, and she worried about him. James Campbell was a very wonderful man, very strong, but his health was failing. So she took her father-in-law and she decided to move out to the country, mountaintop in Kentucky, a beautiful, quiet farming community. She thought it would be lovely for him to have some fresh air and maybe some fruits and vegetables, grown on the farm. So they moved out there and they spent a glorious week together, just appreciating living in the country and out of the city and taking walks and such. One morning she went to get him for breakfast, and she found that James had passed away in his sleep. It was devastating, but she was a strong woman, and she took things under control, and she realized, I don't know where to bury him. I don't know where the family graveyard is. I don't think any visitors have ever come to our home. She really didn't know his family that well. As odd as that seemed, I think most of them had passed on, and she didn't know where they were. So she decided, since he loved it there and he was very happy there at the end, she would bury him in the graveyard there in the farming community. And she did so. And after he was buried, they were putting the headstone into the ground, and she was walking away. And the townspeople were standing around watching, and they saw the headstone, and they pointed and they said, "You can't bury a Campbell in a MacDonald graveyard. No, that can't happen." And she wasn't quite sure what to make of that. That was kind of an odd reaction. She knew, some of the history, that the Campbells and the MacDonalds didn't get along in Scotland, but I mean, this was America. Come on. So she realized small town folk, that's the way it is, and she said, this is where I'm burying him, and he is going to stay here. So a week later, she came back and decided to put some new fresh flowers on the grave. She figured if she attended to it well, maybe the townsfolk would start to like her. So she was keeping up the grave, and she went over to leave the new flowers at the headstone, and the headstone was on the ground. Somebody had wiggled it loose and dropped it on the ground and just pulled it out. So she was really upset. She put the headstone back into the ground. She tamped down the ground. She went over to the corner store where everybody used to hang out and just shoot the breeze. And she walked in there, and they looked at her like they usually did and stared at her real quietly. And she said, "Look, whoever desecrated his grave, I'm on to you. I know it's happening, and don't ever do it again. I'll forgive you this one time." So she went home, and about a week later, she went back to the grave to once again attend it and keep it up to date and neat. And the grave looked like it had exploded. There was dirt everywhere. The headstone was gone. It was just this big void, and her heart was just pounding. And she jumped down into the grave to see, is he in there? And the coffin was wide open. All of the satin had been torn out of the inside of it. There were like claw marks and scratches, and it just looked like somebody had beat the crap out of it and taken his body. So she goes to the corner store where everybody hangs out, and she says, "Okay, somebody took his body, and this is unacceptable. I'm calling the cops." So she calls the cops, and the cops come, and they're like, "Well, lady, we don't really know what to tell you. It had to have been an outsider, somebody passing through, because MacDonald's are really nice people, and they wouldn't do this." And all the citizens, said, "No, we would never do this. We don't want him there, but we won't go near him. He's a Campbell." So she's just very upset, just beside herself. Where is her father-in-law, and what is she going to do? So she goes home, and she paces back and forth, thinking and thinking, and she realizes, I'm going to catch them. So she goes out to the graveyard at night with a flashlight, and she looks around, and there's that hole, and there's the missing headstone, and the hole where the headstone had been, and she's looking around, and she's thinking, well, maybe there's some clues I can find. So she's looking for footprints, she's looking for anything, and she stops, and it's really quiet, except in the woods nearby, she keeps hearing the sound. It sounds like somebody walking or prying or digging, or she's not quite sure what that sound is. So she creeps over to the forest. She turns off her flashlight and she listens. She can still hear it. It's like, and okay, so now she knows there's somebody out there doing something. It could be a critter, but it could be one of these bad guys. So she tiptoes with flashlight off. She gets closer. She stops. She can still hear it. It's definitely closer. So she tiptoes. Okay, now she knows she's really close. She turns on her flashlight and she looks. And there on the ground, she sees the body of her father-in-law, face down in the dirt. The headstone is sticking up in the ground, as if there's a grave there for him. And he's digging at the dirt. He's digging a hole deeper and deeper and deeper. So I guess the story here is that you should never try to bury a Campbell in a MacDonald graveyard.